some of us are closer to it than others, but if you were 20, you know, what you'd say to yourself at 20. I mean, you have that, all of you, I had a passion and I followed it. So was that the simplest piece of advice could you have seen possibly when you were 20 years old? I got married when I was 20. What you would be doing and how you'd be doing it and how you'd actually be making a contribution, that you'd be on a panel? Come on, speak up, girls.
Well, my 20-year-old self is the most in the far distant past, so maybe I can start. I think if I had to say something to my 20-year-old self, it would be, and thankfully, I kind of stumbled into this because one of the themes that I've heard is, you can't plan, but it's to say yes. When something different comes along and you think, oh, I've never done that, I don't know anything about that, I'm not sure I could do that, say yes. Give it a shot. You know, you might find that gem, that passion, that flame, because certainly I was lucky enough to find those sorts of things, or you might find you don't like it. But like Laura, you go off, 20 degrees, and then you do find what keeps you comfortable and inspired. So I would say...
That is great advice.
Say yes more.
I'm telling you, as the other old person up here, that's really good, Jane. Just say yes. I know somebody used to have a credo, you never regret saying no, and I thought, well, yes, you do.
Yeah.
I'll venture a shot at this. I've thought about this question actually in a few different ways. And first and foremost, my 20-year-old self wouldn't have listened to anyone's advice, including my own. But I think probably the most important words I've come across in a long time are from my favorite Zen Buddhist teacher, John Kabat-Zinn, who many of you will know. And his words are, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. I find that very, very helpful when things get rough. And you know that the waves are going to come and they're going to go. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, So I remember being about 20 and 21, although it is longer than I'd like to think about that I was 21. But I was grappling with whether or not I was going to go to Boston University because it was a financial commitment. It was I wasn't sure I was going to be a good journalist. I didn't know if that was the investment I wanted to make. I didn't know if that was a good way to spend my time, and so I was talking to my dad about it. And he cut out an article in the New York Times and he handed it to me. And he said, because you don't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to this columnist who said, again, it comes back to if you want something and it scares you and you've got that feeling in your stomach that you kind of almost want to throw up, but because it's such an exciting opportunity, but it's also scary at the same time, those are the exact opportunities you have to say yes to. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that you have to say yes to. Because you will, being 42, there's the times that, and I didn't work out, actually it didn't work out for me at all in Boston. I went to Boston, I was a terrible journalist, and like the best advice I ever got was go find a field that's going to pay you, because this one won't, right? Because you're not that good, and you can spend a lot of time reflecting on that, but I wouldn't spend the time reflecting on it. But that being said, it was a wonderful opportunity to be there to help me position myself into a better career that was more suited to where I was going to eventually end up. But I don't look back and say, I shouldn't have gone to Boston University. I've never actually had that thought. I've had other times in my life where I thought, oh, I should have done that. I can't believe I didn't take advantage of that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so it is, and when you're 20, everything seems so immediate, right? And you can't imagine being 40 and you think, oh my God, 40, 42, the horror. But it's a long life and a beautiful life. And so seize the moments that you have and remember that they are going to take you to where you should be.
Mm-hmm. Esther, are you 20 yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. What I would have said to my 20-year self, I would have been more compassionate, a little bit, told myself not to be so hard on myself, that not necessarily do I have to fit in a box, and not ever will I fit in a box. But that when I find my voice, things will improve. That's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to add anything, Tanya?
Sure. I would say probably to my 20-year-old self, I was sort of very pedantic at that time and very focused on everything I wanted to do. But I lived in a house with 7 other women, which is an interesting experiment in women's health in itself. And I recall one
Sounds
more.
like Survivor or Big Sister or something.
Pretty much, actually worse. And I remember waking up one morning early and having to go to a conference at McMaster. It was something related to the Sexual Health Center. And I remember one of my, one of the girls that I lived with said, "Why do you always have to wake up early and save the world?" And I think that I would have said to myself, don't worry about them. Be laser focused on what you're doing. Be proud of what you're doing, and don't second guess it yourself.
You know, just in terms of the focus today on women's health in particular, and we've come at it, you know, from all kinds of angles, as we've pointed out. From what all of you are doing, and Karen, if you have to get going, I know you've got to pick up your fabulous kids.
my little
So we
7 9
really
year olds.
appreciate you
Do you mind if I
coming
jump
and your
in?
contribution. Yeah, if you want to
you.
slip out, then
you very
thank
much.
you. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
But in terms of women's health and the things that you care about and you're doing and you're involved in, where do you see sort of the most critical needs in the next short term, 5 years, 10 years? I mean, Ophira, you've got your laser focus on breasts, I guess.
I have a funny comment, but I'll leave it there.
Oh no, go ahead.
People often come to me at parties to ask if I can check their breast lumps, and anyway, it's interesting.
How charming.
And I said to my male friends, you know, I felt more breasts at parties than all you guys combined. But we digress. The important, I think some of the most important things facing women here are the same things that are facing women everywhere, and that's the continued struggle for equity. And when it comes to specific health issues, breast cancer is just one of the many cancers that women and men get. I would suggest that the non-communicable, as we say, the chronic diseases, particularly in older women, because we have aging population, and the same in middle-income countries like India and China, populations are aging and people are getting the diseases that we never used to think they would get there. And here we're lucky, we've got Paula in charge and in the lead at Women's College Research Institute working on the issues relevant to elderly women whose health problems have been long neglected, not just because they weren't included in clinical trials and because, you know, women's health traditionally was thought of as reproductive health. And so I'm glad to see now the WHO, the World Health Organization's latest bulletin, you can look it up online, September bulletin, is dedicated to women's health along the life course, which means from birth to death. And that includes a lot of problems that women are facing now in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. And we've got to pay attention to what their needs are and to help sort of bridge those gaps.
We're grateful, those of us getting along the spectrum. And again, I'm keeping my eyes open if hands are going up. But anyway, in terms of things that you feel with regard to women's health are key issues, anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Sure, I can sort of...
You can, I know, from your particular perspective.
Well, I would say in terms of the fundraising piece, I'm very curious about all of the uniquely named events that are marketed towards young women, particularly things like the booby ball. I'm very curious to see if these movements, if these events are sort of catalysts for broader awareness, broader education. Does it actually, just having a cute and quippy name actually lead to people being curious, interested, engaged in the topic that that event is supporting or raising funds for? I think that's quite interesting to me to see how do we engage young women in their health in new and novel ways, and is it actually making an impact?
Great.
Can I just say one of the challenges I think for women's health in addition to equity is to ensure that our institutions, the ones we've typically looked to at least restore health, a hospital for example, starts to become more holistic in the provision of an understanding of health for women. So it's education. It's young women understanding that there are things that they can do now to maintain their heart and stroke health, to make the lifestyle changes to avoid cancer, avoid osteoporosis and the like. But also I think it's going to take the kind of initiatives like are underway at Women's College, because if there's ever leadership in women's health, it will come from Women's College, but it will also come from the fulcrum of women's experience. We're used to doing a whole bunch new with not very much. We're used to being very practical, and I'm talking now about us in our lives, what we saw our mothers and our grandmothers do in their kitchens, for example, and in their communities. We're used to accomplishing things collectively. We're used to relying on relationships as opposed to delivery systems to create an environment in which we can all thrive. And so from that perspective, I think one of the challenges that we're going to be facing collectively, and Basanthi's keenly aware of this as a province, is to deliver health care, which is not simply health restoration through curing this or cutting this off, but it also is caring for our health collectively, what it is we can do, but caring in a broad sense, so that things that needn't be done in a hospital aren't. But again, it's based on evidence, it's pushed out, there's an opportunity to ensure that it's the best it can be from a medical perspective. And that's going to be, I think, one of our major, we're going to have to restructure our process over the next 5 to 10 years. Women's College has this thing called WEAVE, which is the Women's Health Initiative. Help me, Marilyn, I've forgotten what it stands for.
Institute for Health System Solutions and Virtual Care.
Thank you. All right. Institute for Health System Solutions and Virtual Care. The virtual care gives you a hint as to one of the tools that we're using. But the health system solution, we've got to break down the walls, because women, we don't live our lives in silos. We've always related to matters through relationships, and the healthcare system has to really reflect that, I think, to do well by women and for women.
And, good for you. I really like you. I'm really grateful, because I was getting sick of my questions.
Well, I apologize. I don't actually come from a healthcare I'm
Even
loud.
better.
Hi. I don't come from a healthcare background, so I'm sorry if it can't pertain more closely to that. But I just was struck by, I think the word feminism only came up once, or was only spoken once by Jane, and it was in regard to how it's now a dirty word, which it's something that I is very sad about. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to where you see not just the term feminism coming into your various works, but also the idea of it as a political movement, which I think is something that is really important, and especially in regards to what Jane was just talking about in terms of structural things that we need to be addressing.
What an interesting question, and thank you for that, because it really does take me back. Feminism was a dirty word then, back when I was living it, and it's, I think, a dirty word now. My daughter, one of my daughter's friends referred to it as the new F word. And I think that's a shame, because to me feminism is simply ensuring that women have the opportunity to be full people. And and as a movement, that includes calling what you see, trying to change what gets in the way of that. It's the leaning in. It's I think been framed more recently in a way that skirts around the label. It's leaning in. It's women on boards. It's empowerment. It's a whole variety of things. But it's feminism. It's just talking about women have their beings and their experiences have value, should be respected, have a place found for them, and the system should incorporate that space and that value and that
we know
comfort.
there's still work to be done.
And so to come back to it, the Feminist History Society publishes a book a year, and last year was Michelle Landsberg's collection of her stories, and it was called Writing the Revolution. And I haven't read the whole thing, but oh my Lord, there were some wonderful papers in there. So go back and just nose around. You'll find whatever you need to take to live in your own life, and whether you call it by the F label or not is your choice. That's a feminist kind of policy. It's your choice.
We're
but
so
there-
inclusive.
But there are some wonderful lessons there that I think we all need to remember and to live, because if you're not doing something, it will be done to you. Trust me, after over 45 years in this field, I can say that with certainty. Eternal vigilance used to be the watchword of feminism. It's now the watchword of women, should be. You just only have to look at Roe and Wade in the States. Look at what's being pulled back. All the rights that the feminist and the feminism, the movement pulled together for all those years are being chipped away at. They're being eroded from a legal structure, certainly. We have other huge initiatives. Ophira's work, international things, the WHO announcement for this month, it's huge. But where would it have been if people hadn't been pushing? And people tend to speak in their own self-interest and in their own self-knowledge, from their own self-knowledge. And for women, it's what we want for ourselves, for our sisters, for our mothers, and for our communities. That, to me, is feminism.
Ophira, when you're working particularly in other parts of the world, I mean, how does that play there? How do they regard feminism?
Well, I'll use Bangladesh as an example. There certainly is an active movement of small non-governmental organizations run by women to try to enhance efforts to combat violence. Domestic violence is a huge problem in South Asia, particularly in the rural areas. There are efforts at the government level, and the government and the opposition back and forth for the last 20 years. It's not exactly democratic, it's more like a dynasty, but it is two women who've been in power back and forth all this time. And so there's been some good movements towards empowerment through contraception. Believe it or not, the fertility rate. This may not sound like a feminist issue, but believe me, it is. It absolutely is in countries like Bangladesh, which surpassed most of the region in terms of meeting that particular Millennium Development Goal, because women at the helm and women in the communities had the opportunity to go to the villages and talk, backed by government approval, about contraception. And so they've gone from 6, at the average for number of babies per woman was 6 live births 15 years ago, and now it's 2.4. An incredible improvement. Girls are staying in school longer, they're getting married later, so these things are moving in the right direction in that country. At the same time, there's still a lot of deaths every day. There's 5 English language daily papers, and I love reading them when I'm there, and sometimes online here. And there's always story after story after story of women being killed and acid attacks and everything else, often because of dowry, even though the law, does not allow for dowries, which means the girl's family has to pay the boy's family, and I say girl and boy because that's how young they are. And then the boy's family often almost holds the girl ransom for more money. And sometimes they kill her if they don't get what they want. And so even though there's a law, it needs to be enforced. So the enforcement of a lot of these things we talk about here, like equal pay, yeah, but the reality isn't quite there yet. There's a long way to go in a country like Bangladesh, but here as well. Yeah.
If either you want to weigh in with a word or two on feminism, because you're
Sorry, that was long.
young pups, that's good. And otherwise, we'll... one more question. All right. Should we do that? One more question?
Yep.
No, go. TikTok.
Well, this is more at a micro level based on what we're talking about. But so much of the research talks about women put themselves last, and that's why there's so many health issues with women, because they're taking care of everyone around them and put their own health last. So my question to the panel is, given your expansive work, volunteer and family commitments, what do you do to maintain your own mental and physical health?
Balance in life. Me? I'm a moderator. I don't have to answer. But I will say, it's always been critically important to me. It's funny, I can see even speeches I gave years ago. I was lucky I had a job that, I worked in morning TV for a long time. I could be home in the afternoon with my kids. My husband worked like a maniac, so he wasn't a whole lot of help. And, seeing my mom and seeing my friends, getting exercise. I believe exercise is the cure for almost everything, that sort of physical health. that the 30s are a blur, of course, maybe the 40s, but I would say I always made a concerted effort to carve out some time for myself that was with my girlfriends, that gave back to me and kept me decently healthy. And I was generally pretty selfish about that. And even if they said, you've got an interview at 3 o'clock, if I was going to be at the gym, I'd go, I'm sorry, I have an appointment. And I wouldn't say what it was. I just have an appointment. And I knew enough to do that.
I had no balance. And I'm serious about that. And it's only been in the last decade that I have taken up with a vengeance, exercise, some fitness, trying to maintain my health. If I'd known when I was 12 that I was supposed to be drinking milk and doing workouts, I would have, but now I've got osteo, So you live and learn those sorts of things. The thing that I found allowed me to maintain myself is I loved it. I loved it all. And I used to say, I had 3 kids under 5. I was still working. I was trying to do some meaningful volunteer work. And people say, aren't you stressed? And I said, no. I'm pressured, but I'm not stressed. And that was the gift, I think, that I got back, was that I love going to meetings because there are generally people with interesting problems or similar solutions. You get smart people around a table, you tussle with an issue, you get it fixed, you move on. And it's really satisfying. So for me, it scratched all the itches I had. And as a result, I got virtually nothing but pleasure from it, and so it was easy to do. And now I work out, and I spend a lot of time in my vegetable garden in the summer.
In terms of balance, the best way to go about it for me is creating boundaries. I'm effective quite a bit when it comes to my peers and supporting this population because it's so close to me. So I have to take in consideration about self-care, about taking a step back and going back to reality too. One of the things with Frontline, it's just becomes so robotic after a while. You just keep on helping, but you start forgetting what the compassion means to that. And to actually say you're allowed to feel sad about certain situations and take the time for that. So it's really about self-care, drawing boundaries, and knowing why I'm doing it. So
it's a good thought, yes.
Couple things. When I went through residency, I really, like most medical residents, I think I worked myself into the ground, but I took it to such extremes. I don't think I was a healthy person at all for those few years. And what I learned from that experience, one is I found meditation, which I don't do regularly now, I should, but I learned so much from just studying the practice and then doing it, and then teaching it a little bit, which helped keep up the skills. So when I was at the Kingston Regional Cancer Center, my first 2 years as an oncologist, I was at Queen's, I decided to start a course for every Tuesday afternoon for staff, not for patients actually, for staff. I did a guided meditation course there. And when I left in 2007, I think it kept going because I taught somebody else to do it. There's something about stopping and just breathing that if I can try to incorporate that into every day, almost every moment, whenever you feel something coming up that's stressful, whether it's happy or not, is to remember that strong emotions pass and that you have to take the time to breathe. And exercise, everybody here is saying, is so important. That's like tuning out. And to me, with music, it's like you get to dance. It's so much fun. It's the best. Anyway.
Tanya.
Well, in thinking about this question, I sort of think about both of my parents, and they didn't smoke, they don't drink, they don't have high cholesterol, they're probably underweight if anything, they work out every single day, they eat only organic, and yet both of them have been plagued with chronic disease. My mother with hypertension for the past 20 years, and she's about 90 pounds, she's teeny, and has a six-pack, and my dad with heart disease and bypass surgery. And I look at them and I say, well, we could just say genetics, but you have to look at the role that stress plays in your life and manifests in the body. And it's something I struggle with every day. I don't know if there is such a thing as balance, but it's something I'm always working towards and not wanting that to be my trajectory. So I think certainly practicing self-care is something that's an eternal struggle for me, because everything that I'm doing so closely aligns with my personal values that I'm like, I can't give up anything. It's all rewarding. So I think just finding those moments to reflect, I think that's the most important thing, and ensuring that I'm compassionate and I'm mindful and thoughtful in how I'm approaching everything, because you can just get into the minutia and the day-to-day and just feel like you're just like operating at 150% at all times. But when you're thoughtful and you're mindful, I think that the product is better. So walking and just being out and about in this city is a great solace for me, and definitely dancing for sure. That's a good one. But yeah, I don't think that there is such a thing as balance. I think everyone finds their own kind of place, but always striving for it.